All right. So I am excited to interview another host of a different thyroid related podcast, Annabel Bateman, who is a Hashimoto's patient, author, advocate, and coach. She has learned in 25 years of living with Hashimoto's that the key is developing a lifestyle that supports and doesn't stress her thyroid health, drawing on skills learned in previous years as a lawyer, life coach, family law mediator, and author. Annabel seeks to empower, educate, and encourage women with thyroid conditions to develop their own thyroid friendly lifestyle approach to their health so that they can thrive and not just survive. And as I mentioned, she hosts a successful podcast, Let's Talk Thyroid, which seeks to spread thyroid awareness and information and is active on social media to spread positive and practical thyroid related information. And then Annabelle's latest book, Let's Talk Thyroid, Positive and Practical Thyroid Help. This is all about how to live a thyroid friendly lifestyle. And while there is no magic happy thyroid formula or protocol, you've got to start somewhere. And this book is out somewhere. Annabelle lives in Brisbane, Australia, with her husband and three teenage sons. And, thank you so much for joining us, Annabelle.
Oh, thank you, Eric, for having me. It's fun. I've just had you on my podcast, and that's going out soon. And really, I'm really looking forward to being on the other side of the microphone today.
Yeah, same here. And also, you made a note. I should also let listeners know that the Let's Talk Thyroid book was published under another name, Kiss and Make Up with Your Thyroid. So it's the same book, but just a different name, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And I think for most people now, you'll find it just under Let's Talk Thyroid. That's what it's called on Amazon. It's just for people buying locally in Australia. I've still got copies of the original cover. So that's why I was like trying to do this dual promotion thing. But yeah, same book, new title. Just trying to keep the Let's Talk Thyroid thing simple.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, why don't we dive into your history? Not just. I mean,
Mm.
you'll talk about Hashimoto's, but well, obviously it ties into your book. So, why did you decide to write your book? Eventually, create your podcast, which obviously relates to your journey with Hashimoto's.
Yeah, well, I think I started. I had the idea to write the book. Maybe we'll go back. Like a bit of my story was, I was diagnosed when I was 23, 22. I can never remember, 22, 23, back in 1996. And so really at that point, I look back and I think I was struggling for a long time. For me, I suspect that probably puberty was one of the key triggers for me. So going back to around that 12-ish mark, and so feel like by the time I'd got to the end of my degree, which is when I was diagnosed, I had all the classic hypothyroid symptoms. The hair was falling out, thinning, frizzy. I was puffy. I'd gained a lot of weight. I couldn't lose weight. I was tired. My muscles were fatigued. Like I couldn't hold my arms up to wash my hair or blow dry my hair, like without, and that was sort of the final sign. So, you know, I was lucky in a lot of ways in that it had gone so far, it was very easy to diagnose. So I didn't get the whole runaround that a lot of thyroid patients get. But went to see my doctor. He's like, oh my gosh, your TSH is 185. You need to go see the endocrinologist tomorrow, which I did. And the endocrinologist just said, you'll be fine. Just take a pill for the rest of your life. You'll be right. And so I sat in the car and cried, thinking, I'm 22. I don't want to be on medication for the rest of my life. But that started me down that, I guess, the traditional hypothyroid management path of taking medication, which I did. And obviously I needed that. I still need it. I still take thyroid medication. But for those first sort of, I'd say about 10 to 15 years, like whilst I think I'm always someone that's been fairly open to natural things. And I remember seeing naturopaths early on in the journey and probably taking different supplements. I still largely managed it fairly traditionally, like really mostly about taking the medication. And, you know, that was probably the core thing I would say I did. And around that sort of then I'd say there's a 5-year overlap where I was probably starting to hear about diet and lifestyle changes, but not really wanting them to be true, and not really, and kind of dabbling. I'd say I dabbled for a few years. If I try going gluten free, and then I give up because it all seemed too hard, and I didn't really know if it was making a difference. But really, for the last 10 years, I think I got to the point where I was like, right, I'm going to give this diet, particularly the diet, that's where I started, a really good go. And I went paleo pretty hardcore for 30 days about 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, right, I didn't know I could feel like this. And, the bloating went away. I was like, oh, I'm not just greedy and lazy. I thought I was greedy and lazy. And that's why I felt, like 6 months pregnant every time after I ate. And, so it was really, I was able to start to feel different and better, and that with the diet. And then over the last 10 years, I guess there's a whole lot of other, you know, um, stress and mindset and reducing toxins and other things that I've done. So that's sort of, 25 years in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And I'm
So,
the sort of yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. Go on. So, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, and I guess I'm the sort of person that when I find something that works, I like to share it. I like to talk about it to other people. And when I started changing my diet, I started a food blog, which was called What Annabel Cooks. And I just was really just a more of a way of recording what I was cooking, really. Just I thought it'll just be, instead of writing in an old exercise book like my mum and my grandma used to do, I thought I'll just start a blog. That sounds like fun. And it was fun. And it sort of spread a bit, and spread a bit more. And then one of my friends said, oh, you should write a cookbook. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So I wrote a cookbook. And so sort of getting to the Let's Talk Thyroid book and the podcast has been a process, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, of sharing what I'm learning along the way, and realizing that it is this holistic approach. We really do need to take, there's never just one thing. Whilst the diet was massive, it's not been the whole story. And so I had the idea of writing another book that probably encompassed everything, it was the food, it was the lifestyle, it was, how to reduce your toxic load, it was how to deal with mindset, it was a whole lot of different things. And I, but a few years ago when I had that idea, my husband's like, don't start anything new. You're always starting new things. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll have 6 months where I won't start anything, but and in that 6 months, I plan to start the podcast first. I thought I'll do the podcast first. I think that's a good idea. I'll meet new people, get more content for the book. So about 2.5 years ago, started the podcast, and it's been fabulous. And then last year I wrote the book. This year I've been, just trying to do a bit of both, get the message out there.
All right. Now that's an awesome story. So for I guess the first 15 years, you really didn't do much from a diet and lifestyle perspective. It wasn't until 10 years ago that you finally made changes, followed that paleo diet, noticed improvements, and then started incorporating other lifestyle factors. And that led you to, write your blog first, it sounds like, and then a diet related book, before finally rolling out the current book and podcast. Is that correct then?
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. Yeah, I think it's, there's all sorts of weaves and twists, isn't it, that we take in life. But yeah, that's a good summary.
And what the thyroid hormone replacement that you're taking, has that stayed consistent over the years? Like as far as the type you're taking and the dosage you're
Mm.
taking, are you taking like levothyroxine or?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably over the years, I've tried a number of the different thyroid medication options, but I've ended up back on the levothyroxine. We call it Eroxon here. And Yeah. So, yep. And I've been on a pretty stable dose for a long time now. So I guess if you went right back, that's why I started on gradually increasing the doses. I've tried the natural desiccated thyroid. I've tried slow release T3. And I guess the other options just didn't work well enough for me. They weren't that light bulb moment that they are for some people. And so whilst I don't know that the levothyroxine's brilliant either for me, I've just spent a lot of other time working on some of those conversion pathways and, getting my gut right and making my body about as healthy as I can, within the limits of life to allow for some of like that T4, T3 conversion. And yeah, so I think for me, it's been a lot of trial and error over the years, but the different forms of medication never really were that amazing for me to stay on them. So I've kind of ended up back on the standard. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, everybody's different. There are people who, switch to desiccated and they feel a lot better. They feel a big difference. Of
Mm,
course, they stay on the desiccated. But then, yeah, there are people that, make the change, make the transition to desiccated and just really don't feel any different. And some people who even feel better on the, synthetic T4, the levothyroxine. So, yeah, just a good
mm.
example of how you need to listen to your body, which you did. So you did try different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, look, I'm grateful that like I've had a really good doctor for probably the last 15, 16 years. And so actually probably the trialing different medications, that's what attracted me to her in the first place was that I knew through someone else that she was open to prescribing different forms of thyroid medication. So yeah, so I'm really glad I've tried that, and maybe I will again at some point into the future. I don't know, but for a while now, I've sort of been just back on the standard treatment, but doing a whole lot. Like this is where I guess I say, it's the medication plus. It's the holistic thing. I'm not just if I maybe wasn't doing all of the diet and lifestyle things, then maybe I would still be exploring other thyroid medication options, because I don't think just the standard synthetic T4 replacement is enough. For me, I've got it. It's everything.
Yeah. So, with that being said, why don't we dive into some of the aspects of your book, including the
Mm,
four core lifestyle pillars that you talk about?
yeah, yeah. So I think when I looked at all of the core categories of the different diet and lifestyle factors that both have helped me, and when I've talked to different experts around the world and done lots of reading and books and courses and things that we do, uh, I don't think they're four core pillars that are unique to me. I think they're pretty consistent, and when we were chatting the other day on my show, I'm like, yeah, we're pretty much on the same page here. So I've broken it down into mindset, and having that. And for me, mindset is, and I put it first actually as the first pillar, because it really helps to have both a long-term approach and a curious and hopeful approach, I think, to our thyroid health. We're in it for the long haul, where this isn't something that's going to be fixed in 30 days or 6 months. And even if we were able to get our thyroid back into remission and feel great, you can't just abandon everything that got you there. So that I think having that mindset of this is long term, this is going to take some experimentation, but there's always something I can do, and just having that sort of, I guess, that attitude and approach from the beginning. So that's the first pillar. The second one is what I've called unwinding, which is that positive spin on stress management. I think, stress is critical, that we learn how to manage stress. But I wanted to call that unwinding, because I think that's really what we've got to learn how to do. And the third one is food. I think obviously food is important, and food is often like, it was the first place I started really. And it's the first place a lot of people start, but I didn't want to put it really as the first pillar, because I think sometimes people get stuck there and then don't move on.
Mhm.
So food, and my approach to food generally is about being anti-inflammatory. It's just removing the things that for my body are inflammatory, and that's ultimately going to look slightly different for everybody, but a lot of core themes. And then the final pillar is low tox living. So just reducing that day-to-day chemical exposure as much as we can. And there are lots of great products out there now in that, from, cleaning to skincare and makeup, to make it so much easier than it used to be. So they're the four. And there's other things that like I've sort of fit into there, like, sleep and exercise sort of are in there as well, which probably really could be their own pillars. They're really important too. But I thought part of what I try to do, I've tried to do in the book, and then what I do is try to keep it super simple, like that KISS principle, keep it super simple. And so keep it to 4 things.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
makes sense. So when it comes to mindset, is that
Mm.
something you find like when you work with someone, is that something where you find people could change, or do they already have to kind of come in with that natural mindset that they're, that I could address the cause of this condition, and not, so yeah, like, is that something that you
Mm.
help people, or is that something I'll tell you what, in my, my experience, again, most people probably already come in with the mindset, but there are some people who just don't. They have that, a lot of people have the natural mindset, but some people, they're just trying to. In my case, I deal with a lot of hyperthyroidism, so they're trying to do everything they can. They're more desperate to like avoid radioactive iodine
Mm.
thyroid surgery. In the case of Hashimoto's, some don't see it as big of a deal to take the thyroid hormone replacement. So
Mm.
my guess would be most people already have that mindset, that natural mindset that see you. But I figured I'd ask, since it's the very first pillar that you discuss.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, I think, as you say, there's a bit of both, because even to be open to looking at diet and lifestyle requires an element of that open mind, that mindset. And so a lot of what I hope that I do, both, you know, in my programs and even on the podcast, is just to catch the people that are new in their journey. So like get maybe from the get-go, understand that there's more that you can do than just take the thyroid pills. Um, Even if they're not making those changes straight away, just be aware that right from the beginning, there are other things. And also the people that may have been just taking their thyroid replacement for 10, 15 years without any real thought that there's anything else they can do, and that but still kind of trudging through life. And so I think part of what I'm trying to do is spread that awareness, just to get that mindset, like just like, I never thought of, I just thought I had to take my pill. I didn't know there was anything else I could do. And so then I think once people get to wanting to work with people like you or I, yeah, they do have more of that. They're open to making some changes. Yeah, and then obviously there's a broad range of people that, some are really ready, they're desperate, some will give it a go, probably a bit like me, more of that sort of that 5-year overlap, "Oh, I'll give it a go, but I'm not really sure it's gonna work. I don't know if I really want it to work, 'cause this sounds too hard. I don't really want it." It takes a long time, I think, to change that mindset and be open to a long-term diet and lifestyle change, and just even accepting that you've got to kind of deal with this forever in a reasonably active way. That's a lot of grieving that I think can go along with that. So I have to remind myself sometimes that this is me 10, 15 years down the track. This is not, you know, it took me a while to get there. And so it does take a lot of people time to get there. And then, but for other people, it's like, right, bang, done. Yep. So I think there's a variety.
And then stress. So what do you currently do about stress management? Do you block out time on a regular basis, whether it's, yoga, meditation? So what do you do? What do you recommend to your clients or as part of your programs?
Mm. Oh, look, I'm a constant work in progress, Eric, when it comes to this. I think I find one of the things I've tried to do over the years is not have an overscheduled calendar. That's probably, I think I'm reasonably good at that. So I don't make myself available to, all the time. My kids are older, and I think that's helped a lot. I definitely, when they were little and needed a lot more of my time and attention, and like even the fact that they can get themselves home from school now, and that helps. And so I've found, for me, I need time on my own, and I get a lot of that. Like, I work from home. The kids are largely at school. My husband's at work, so I get some of that naturally now, whereas perhaps in years past, I didn't. So, but I can also be deliberate about that. Um, I'm not a great meditator. Like, I've tried all the apps I've got, and I will do that from time to time. Just go listen to, 1 minute, 2 minute. Like, I'm not very good at the long things. Probably when I know I really need to unwind, I'll get out a big jigsaw puzzle. That's probably my preferred way to meditate, is to do a puzzle. I just feel like there's enough, like, tuning out everything else to find where this piece goes, that gives me that calm state of mind. What else do I do? I like to I use my essential oils actually a fair bit to unwind. I'll just sort of either put something in the diffuser or roll something on my wrist and just take a few big deep breaths. I've got a few favorites for unwinding.
I was going to
Um,
ask you that. Can you name some of your favorite essential oils?
yeah. Well, my favorites for that sort of when I just need to calm down, probably neroli would probably be up there in my top. It's probably my favorite one. There's a blend I use called Balance that's got a lot of those sort of earthy, or it's those earthy oils. Although neroli is a flower, but often, your woods and trees that are kind of grounded. I like Siberian fir and lime is a blend that I really like in the diffuser. But probably my go-to just to put on me would be neroli when I'm feeling stressed.
Okay. And you said you use
Hmm.
it every day, like, and you put it in your diffuser typically?
Yeah, I mean, typically, look, I use essential oils across the day in all sorts of different formats, but yeah, in terms of, if I'm really aware that I'm a bit kind of wound up and need to calm down, then yeah, having something going in the diffuser. But I'll just, like, I don't know, just grab something and literally just roll it on and just take a few big deep breaths. Sometimes just put like a drop of an essential oil in my hand, and I think sometimes just that taking that minute to stop and take a couple of big, slow, deep breaths in and of itself, even without the essential oil, is, I find myself sighing a lot when I know I need to just like, so, but in terms of the oils, yeah, either diffusing them or putting them on when I use them in other ways. I use them in my cooking and I use them in other ways. But in terms of that, reducing stress, yeah, either on me like a perfume or in the diffuser would be my favorite ways.
And then food. So you said you followed a paleo diet, and do you currently follow a similar diet?
Yeah, I really kind of describe my diet as paleo-ish. So 100% gluten-free, increasingly 100, I mean, I'd say I'm probably like 99% dairy-free these days. That took me much, much longer to get to. But I do feel a lot better without dairy. Um, Yeah, I think when I first went paleo, like, I cut it all out, the gluten, grains, dairy, sugars, legumes, like the whole thing. And I definitely feel best when I'm following that you know, quite strictly. But life comes and goes in ebbs and flows. And I suppose over time, what I've found is as long as I'm 100% gluten free, it gives me a little bit of leeway with some of the other things, but over time, less and less leeway with the dairy, the grains. Like for example, it was our wedding anniversary this week. We went out for dinner as a family. We went to a Chinese restaurant that actually does gluten-free, which in itself is a miracle here. I don't know what Chinese is like in America, but to find one that even does gluten-free is like next to impossible. And I did have a small amount of rice and it was fine. But if I ate rice all the time, then I would feel bloated. So, so I sort of, I guess that's why I say paleo-ish. I'm not super strict with the grains. The dairy increasingly, I just don't do well with dairy. And I found great alternatives now. And I think that's what takes a bit of time too, is like, it took me, I switched out the milk in my coffee for almond milk. And then I found some nice ice cream for that occasional treat, that tastes good. And so I was finding those replacement foods that have helped. I think the gluten is pretty easy once you know where to find and what to do. The dairy I did find harder. So yeah, paleo-ish would be my diet now. But I will have periods, probably a couple of times a year, because I run like a Kickstart Your Thyroid friendly lifestyle program a couple of times a year, and that's around all of these things we're talking about, mindset, affirmations, but diet is core, and we follow that paleo diet. So I tend to, when I'm running that, I will do that too. It's a bit like a reset for me. So I will kind of reset. That's that. I'll let things, looser a little bit, and then I know when I've got to rein things in a bit too. And I think that's part of maintaining that long term. It is still a lifestyle. Like, I'm not throwing everything out. Like I won't eat gluten at all. And increasingly over time, I guess I'm not sort of deviating as much because I just feel better. I feel better when I'm eating closer to paleo.
Yeah, I would say I'm similar. I mean, I eat modified paleo, pretty close to paleo most of the time. But I kid
Mm.
around sometimes. I have to have my pizza, and usually it is gluten-free pizza, but it's not dairy-free pizza. I've had
Yeah, yeah.
the I guess Daya, the dairy substitutes, but I usually don't eat dairy-free pizza. I don't know how's the pizza in Brisbane. That's an important question. I gotta ask you that.
Well, it's an interesting question. I've got one son that delivers pizzas for Pizza Hut, and he's got the youngest son a trial shift this week. So we're three teenage boys love their pizza. I don't know. I suppose I haven't enjoyed pizza personally for a long time because for all of that reasons, gluten-free pizza. There's actually some decent ones now. But by and large, as soon as I eat pizzas, I think it's a combination. Yeah, the tomato isn't great for me, and then the cheese. It's the combination, I think. So there's lots of great pizza in Brisbane. I'm not. I'm probably happier these days just to not even bother. I'd just rather have something completely different.
Okay. Yeah,
But
I agree.
because I guess it's just not worth it. Like, and I will, because we have pizza in the house often, and it's like, oh, I'll just have a piece, and then I feel bloated and I get reflux, and I'm like, because I think it's the combination. It's the grains, even though it's gluten free. It's the cooked tomato sauce that can, in combination with the dairy. I think that dairy free cheese is just vile. Like, it's artificial anyway. So I think, yeah. Yeah. So I'm with you. It's hard to find.
Yeah, and I assume you stay well hydrated too. You drink purified water or spring water. What type of water do you drink?
Yeah, we've got a filter. It took us, again, this is one of those things that took us years actually to make a decision on a filter for our tap at home. So I've been drinking purified water for years, but for a long time, I was buying it in casks because we couldn't decide on the water filter, because the water filters take out all the minerals. So then you got to remineralize, and I didn't want the fluoride. And it was one of those, we just got stuck in overwhelm of researching water filters. But about, I don't know, a few years ago, like, right, we've just got to make a decision. Let's just get a water filter. So we did make a decision. And so we've got, a water filter, one that's sort of on the filters out kind of the core chemicals from the whole house, and then, like, in the sink, we've got one that does a bit more and takes the fluoride out as well. So, yeah, I do. But, it's interesting. Like, recently, I bought a set of those really fancy scales that tell you way too much information about your body. um, and but one of the things that I discovered is that even though I drink a lot of water, my body wasn't is not properly hydrated. So it was ranked quite really low in the body water component according to these scales. So that's something I've just actually had a meeting with my doctor this week, and I'm like, I think I'm dehydrated, even though I'm drinking a lot of water. So we're just sort of working on that at the moment.
That's
I don't
interesting.
drink. I drink. It is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, when you like, so when you urinate, it's not a lighter urine. I mean, that's one sign that usually you are hydrated. I don't, because
Yeah. I
I'm
don't. Yeah. Yeah, like, I'm not my urine isn't really dark. I drink plenty of water. I suspect that my cells aren't hydrating properly, so it's going through, but so I don't know. That's a very much a work in progress. But yeah, I do drink a lot of water. I don't drink a lot of other things. I have 1 cup of coffee a day. Um so I was surprised. I thought I should be pretty well hydrated. And I'm not saying these scales are, I mean, they're just, you know, scales off Amazon. But it was interesting because I was quite low. And so I'm just going to start taking a few electrolytes and, to see if that can help rehydrate from the inside.
yeah, no, that sounds like a plan.
Hmm.
Now you mentioned there's Pizza Hut there, so but you also mentioned coffee. So do they have Starbucks in Brisbane or?
Starbucks hasn't been very successful in Australia. We do have, I don't even know if we've still got Starbucks in Brisbane. They are in Australia, but they have not been wildly successful. I think we're much more about the small. I've got to say, having traveled to America a couple of times, you might do pizza probably better, but we do coffee better.
Oh, cool. I'm not a
So
coffee drinker, so I'm just curious. I don't. So yeah, I don't go to Starbucks. I don't eat at Pizza Hut. Just curious,
yeah,
because
yeah.
again, I've never been to
Yeah.
Australia. So
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of, probably small, coffee shops, espresso coffee, and not so much I mean, you can get all the flavored coffees like they do at Starbucks, but I'd say generally in Australia, we're probably more about the espresso, the cappuccinos, without all of the pumpkin spice latte flavoring. So less sugary and more small, um, brewers and, roasters. So we've got a very competitive coffee market here. But yeah, so I do like my 1 cup of coffee a day.
all
I
right,
don't know that it always likes me, but I like it. And for me, but actually going back to the unwinding, for me, that's part of it. Actually, we've got a coffee machine at home, so, and it grinds the beans. It makes a really good coffee. So that's part of my morning ritual, actually, is I'll take the kids to school, come back, I'll have breakfast, make myself a coffee, and just sitting down with my cup of coffee. I do Wordle. I don't know if you know about Wordle. Do you know? Well, anyway, it's
no,
like a little online word game. So I just do Wordle for the day. Then often, like, I'll read the Bible and I'll journal, and I just have like probably half an hour with my coffee just to just set the day up. And that actually, I think it's more about the ritual and the time than it is actually about the caffeine. But
yeah,
I'm
I
not
think it's the
sure yet.
same with my wife. Again, I've never been a coffee drinker, but my wife,
Mm,
has a cup of coffee per day, and it's more, I think, just not because she's addicted to the caffeine, but she just really enjoys it. She looks forward to it. And now I've become an herbal tea drinker, and to
uh-huh.
me,
Yeah.
I mean, I do it for the health benefits, but I actually enjoy it. Where years ago,
Mm.
if you told me I'd be drinking herbal tea on a daily basis, I wouldn't believe you, but I actually enjoy it. So it sounds like maybe similar, just part of your routine and part of your
Yeah.
unwinding, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Yep. And then, so when talk about water, you mentioned fluoride, which falls under the the toxin category. So what other things do you
Mm,
do as part of your low toxic living, your low tox living? That's the
mm.
fourth pillar.
Yeah, I think again, this has taken years to gradually replace products. So I think what I became aware of probably, and this again, it's probably in that sort of 10 to 15 years ago, was gradually starting to remove some of these products that we're using on and in our bodies every day. So I started switching to more natural makeup. That was probably actually and skincare. That was probably one of the very first things I did. And just finding different brands that didn't have all of the toxic stuff in them. And that was harder back then. Now there's lots. I don't know what it's like in the States, but I mean, here you've got choice. There's not just like one brand. There's lots of brands that are making good, you know, makeup. If you're putting think about all the stuff that you're putting on your skin. So there, I think that's a good place to start is what are you putting on and in your body that contains chemicals? A lot, probably. And makeup, skincare, obviously then, food, not wanting to eat food that's full of chemicals and processed food, water without the chemicals, not drinking out of plastic, I think is important too. But yeah, the skincare and makeup, I think, is something that you can just replace one item at a time over time. Same with household cleaning products. That's probably another one that I've changed a lot. Is I just use natural products there. So I'm not breathing, every time I'm sort of spraying the kitchen counter, I'm not breathing in a whole lot of chemicals. I don't have scented candles in the house. Um, don't use air fragrance sprays. So those sorts of things have just over time been replaced in our house. And I think that is something that we can just do. One item. When the surface spray runs out, either make yourself one or buy one from a natural, a brand that doesn't have all of the toxic stuff in it.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, we do the same thing. And if someone's getting overwhelmed by hearing this, saying, I have all these, cosmetics and cleaners, like you said, you could just finish their current supply, of their
Yeah.
regular cleaner they have, and then swap it out. But yeah, anything you're using on a regular basis, I would recommend to try to make the switch to natural. And it's not, I mean, it's going to be more expensive, but to me, it's not like when you eat food, organic food, that does add up because obviously you're going through the food pretty quickly. But with the products, if you spend a little bit more for something where that cleans your counters, you know, you, uh, I mean, we probably like a month or two it takes us to go through that bottle. I really honestly don't keep
Mm.
track. But same thing with makeup. I mean, I don't really use makeup, but I imagine most makeup is going to last a while. It'll last like a month or two, if not a few months, where you're not.
Oh, probably more
Uh,
than that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah,
alcohol.
exactly. And yeah, yeah. Oh, alcohol. Yeah, there's another
Yeah,
toxin.
yeah. So, well, I want to bring
Yeah.
up alcohol just because I listened to your episode. You have a
Uh-huh.
solo
Yeah.
episode where you spoke about
Mm.
alcohol and haven't covered that yet on the podcast. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about alcohol. If you want to talk about the effects it has on
Mm.
thyroid health, and I mean, wherever you want to go with
Mm.
alcohol, I'm cool with.
Yeah, it was interesting actually because it was a topic that I had been wanting to cover on the podcast for a while too. And generally, I guess as a patient advocate, not as a medical practitioner of any qualified kind, I like to bring on the experts. That's one of the reasons, one of the things I love about the podcast is I get to talk to different experts and bring the expertise that I don't, um, you know, well, I certainly don't have the qualifications for. I think I've worked out, you can know a lot without being qualified as well. But yeah, the alcohol is just something that kept coming up in conversations with different people. Increasingly, I was finding um, my personal tolerance to alcohol is just basically, I think I would say describe myself almost now as intolerant to alcohol. And so I thought, well, I don't know if quite found the right person to bring on. I think I'm just going to go and do some research and do a bit of a talk on it. And so I guess what I found was interesting. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a big topic. And so I think if you listen to that podcast episode, I called it really an introduction. I think it really is an introduction. I think there's there's probably a lot to it that, I don't even, don't understand and haven't delved into. But it just sort of made me realize, I mean, alcohol it's complex, isn't it? Like, there's so many different things associated with with alcohol. But I think what I got out from that was, it really does. It really can impact our thyroid health in lots of different ways. It can impact the thyroid gland itself. It can, impact the gut, and then when we have leaky gut, that's not going to help the autoimmune response. Obviously, it impacts on the liver, and the liver is a core place where that thyroid conversion takes place. So, and I don't have a gallbladder. I haven't had a gallbladder for 15 or 16 years, which again is reasonably common in Hashimoto's patients. So I've always been aware that my liver needs extra support, and so alcohol impacts the liver. So it's going to be, again, it's just like that another thing. It's another layer of inflammation. So I mean, I think in the end, everyone's got to make, obviously, their personal decisions about alcohol. And for me, it's just taken a gradual decline. Like, I've never been a big drinker. I think I've went back to, like, decades of dieting, and I would just rather eat my calories than drink them, is what I used to say. So I like food more than I like alcohol. But even now. So I don't know. I wouldn't say I don't drink. I do enjoy a drink, but I don't enjoy the after effects, which usually for me is I have trouble falling asleep, even just with one, like, it doesn't take a lot. So that's why I say I think I'm pretty intolerant or or super sensitive to alcohol. And I don't think it's just me. I think I've worked out from talking to lots of different people in this thyroid space. It's just, it often doesn't agree well. And there are things we can do, like, there are better forms of alcohol than others, I suppose. So, your super sugary cocktails, probably not a great idea because of all the, the sugar and often the cream and other things that go along with those. Clean spirits generally seem to be better tolerated, even than, say, your wine. Like, that was probably the first course, like, wine, I just don't think I'm really enjoying wine, and I think it's the sugars. But I think there's lots of things you can do now without alcohol. I don't know what it's like in America, but there's a big, look, Australia has a very big drinking culture, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I've started to see there are more non-alcoholic drink options being promoted in the alcohol space, like the alcohol-free gins and alcohol-free whiskeys and alcohol-free things. So I think, oh, that's interesting. There's obviously a place for that. And I like to often have things just like, your kombuchas and water kefir I quite like. So I don't drink those all the time, but having something special on a Friday night or, going out with friends, sometimes it's nice to have something that's not just water. So that's probably how I would, that's probably my take on alcohol. But I think it's there's a lot to it.
Yeah, and I'm not a drinker either, but I bring it up just because like you mentioned, coffee. A lot of people have a difficult time giving up coffee, and then
Mm,
there are people who want to have at least like once or twice a week, like a glass of red wine or white wine. Yeah, and I mean,
mm,
sometimes other alcoholic beverages, but the wine is very common where people ask, and you know,
mm,
a- and again, usually initially, I'm telling people just to completely avoid the alcohol while healing, and then once you're,
mm,
in a better state of health, then every now and then I don't see it being a big deal. Having a glass of wine or even other types of alcohol sometimes. But
Mm,
but yeah, so
mm.
I just wanted to get your opinion. You're right about the impact it has on the gut. Potentially increasing the intestinal permeability. At least being a contributing factor to a leaky gut. So, which is a
Mm.
big reason. Also, I don't want people to consume alcohol. There's a lot of things you mentioned, gluten that could affect the gut. So we want to try to
Oh, yeah,
avoid
yeah,
all
yeah.
those foods and beverages.
Beer.
Yep.
Yeah, beer. I think a lot of people don't know that beer has gluten in it. So,
Yeah. Well, even a gluten-free beer, I would say, still while regaining your health, I would say avoid
mm.
avoid the alcohol. I assume they have gluten-free beer in
Yeah, yeah.
Australia.
Yep, we do. Yep,
All right. Well,
yep.
any additional tips? Is there anything I should have asked you that you want me to ask you or you want to chat about? Any additional tips you have for those dealing with a thyroid or autoimmune thyroid condition?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing I like to say is there's well, there are lots of things that you can do, but try not to get overwhelmed by those things because when we feel overwhelmed, then we end up doing nothing. So you're better off just doing one thing, you know, and developing that into your lifestyle and then pick another thing. It's just I just think some of those when we're making changes, some of it does depend on our personality and our approach, whether we like to dive all in or whether we just like to kind of, you know, do a little bit at a time. But whatever is going to work in the long term for you, then do it that way. But you are, if you're listening and you're new to thyroid health issues and you think all you've got to do is take medication, I think you're cheating yourself, really. You're cheating yourself out of feeling much better than you could, and so I think that's probably what I would say is, that there are things you can do. Just take it bit by bit. You don't have to do everything all at once, but you are going to have to make some changes if you want to feel great, because the medication will get you somewhere, but probably not everywhere. And I think we all want to be feeling as good as we can. We all want to get as much out of life as we can. We want to contribute, to our communities. And so the better we can feel, then the more that we can be of benefit to our communities around us. So you can do it. I guess I'm a words of affirmation person. So I tell myself all the time, it's okay, you can do it, Annabelle. Come on, you can do it. So if I can do it, you can do it.
Well said. And Annabelle, where can people learn more about you? There's obviously your podcast, Let's Talk About Thyroid, which, as you mentioned, you just recently interviewed me. So you could find my
Yep.
interview as well as other,
Yep.
great interviews on Annabelle's podcast. So Let's Talk About Thyroid, the book and podcast. What's your website?
Yeah, so I've just made everything Let's Talk Thyroid. So just to, as again, keep it simple. So brand new website, it's letstalkthyroid.com. So you'll find everything there, access to, that's probably the simplest thing. Letstalkthyroid.com. You can find the book, the podcast, everything else there. And my social media, I'm pretty active on Instagram and Facebook, and that's annabel.bateman at .wellness. So that's the at annabel.bateman.wellness. But
All
everything
right.
else is Let's Talk Thyroid. Yeah.
Okay. Well, make sure to include all the links in the show notes. And thank you so much, Annabelle. It was great chatting with you again, and really, nice to dive into the pillars, talk a little bit about alcohol, and talk a little bit about. Didn't expect to talk about Pizza Hut and Starbucks, but it was nice chatting
That's
about
all
that too. And
right.
but again, it was truly was a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show, and it's been really lovely to connect with you. And I think that's one of the lovely things about this whole thyroid health space is connecting with like-minded people around the world. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I definitely agree.